Education Committee, I'm pleased to present the following experts. First is Sheila Weaver, the lead navigator and program coordinator for the Family Caregiver Navigator Project at Boise State University Center for the Study of Aging. Sheila is here. And then we have our own Marilyn Sword, coordinator for the Idaho Caregiver Alliance and former executive director of the Idaho Council on Developmental Disabilities. And we have Lynn Fines here in the middle. She's a program specialist at the Idaho Commission on Aging and adjunct faculty at Boise State University's School of Public and Population Health. And finally, we have Adrian Rodriguez, who's a bilingual intake navigator with the Family Caregiver Navigator Project and a graduate student at in the Master of Public Health program at Boise State. Later, we're going to get that preview of our Caregiver Education Part 2, which is called Winning Strategies for Family Caregiving. Our presenter, Dara Ray, over here in the far red jacket, has over 25 years of experience as a family caregiver and patient advocate. She's the founder of My Care Companions, offering resources, services, and tools for family caregivers. Dara has an MBA from the Anderson School at UCLA and over 25 years of practical business experience. And she is a certified senior advisor. So, I tried to wrap that up as quick as possible because we have so much great information to share. If you'll just join me in welcoming our camera. Sorry, before Sheila gets started, we do have cards on the tables. If you have questions, we'll collect those at the end, and you'll have an opportunity to have your question answered.
Chanel, I think I'm going to start.
Okay.
Are you advancing the slides?
I am now the slide.
Okay, take it. You can move it past the group.
Speak up. Use your big voice.
Use my outside voice. Okay. Usually I don't have a problem. We're here today to talk to all of you about how we and how you can support caregivers in your community. And we want to thank the IWCF for allowing us this time to present. We like to talk to whomever will stand still long enough to hear us. So we think we have an important message of relevance to just about everybody. So we thank you for your time. I coordinate the Idaho Caregiver Alliance. The Caregiver Alliance is a statewide coalition of individuals, organizations, agencies. We're not a 501c3, we don't have a board, we are a virtual statewide coalition. We are under the umbrella of the Boise State Center for the Study of Aging at Boise State, and we've been in place since I think about 2014. You can see our vision here is to serve as a voice and a convener for the voice of people who are informal family caregivers in Idaho. And we want to advance their well-being by promoting collaboration across the variety of silos with caregivers intersect. And we also are unique in that we are lifespan. So we talk about caregivers who, maybe it's a mom who has just brought home an infant with significant health needs, or someone caring for an elderly grandma. So it's across the lifespan. We have a very broad definition of caregiving. We have a number of resources available to you, and you're going to hear in depth about one of them. But we have a very robust resource library that's accessible through our website and is searchable. So you can put in a word and it'll bring up appropriate resources for that topic. We have an annual conference that you can see is coming up in March, and it's our 12th annual conference. This year it will continue to be virtual using the Zoom platform as we've done for the last 2 years. But we also have a Spanish-speaking track, and this will be our 2nd year of that. Just presented by Spanish speakers for Spanish speakers. And it will be at the Hispanic Cultural Center in Nampa and on Zoom. So it will be offered in hybrid form. The rest of the conference will be on Zoom. And you can see we have our keynote speaker nailed down. And so if you are interested in that, there's breakout sessions, there's general sessions, and I think the cost is $15 for a full Saturday of information. And registration is now open, you can go to our website and register. We have a variety of projects and events. One of those is coming up on Valentine's Day. We are resuming our annual legislative lunch, and that is for legislators, their spouses, and family caregivers, and there is no cost to that. So if that's of interest to you, contact your legislator and ask them to meet you there at 11:30 on Valentine's Day. We're having soup and Valentine cookies, and just talking to policymakers about caregiving. There are 51 new legislators out of 105 this year, so there's a lot of educating to be done. And we have a monthly email newsletter that goes out. We also have a weekly legislative update during the legislative session, if that's something you would like to see in your inbox. So that's kind of the Idaho Caregiver Alliance. Can we have the next slide? As I said, we are an alliance, and these are some of our partners. First and foremost, family caregivers, and then all those pieces of the Department of Health and Welfare, behavioral health, public health, etc. We work, because we're Lifespan, we work with Idaho Parents Unlimited. It's the organization that serves parents of kids with special needs in Idaho. And the National Alliance for Mental Illness that many of you are probably aware of. That is the organization that promotes education and information and supports for people with mental illness. We work with payers of care. Molina Healthcare, Blue Cross of Idaho are both on our leadership team. Obviously AARP, because we focus a lot on senior issues. The Commission on Aging, and that's our funding has come from the Commission on Aging through a Lifespan respite grant at the federal level that we've had since, I think, 2014. Both St. Al's and St. Luke's and other healthcare providers, healthcare systems, are involved with our project. Kootenai Health in Coeur d'Alene. Obviously, the Center for the Study of Aging at Boise State. And we are also working closely with the Independent Living Centers. You all have funded a grant to link on direct care professionals. I've been working very closely with Jeremy on that project, and we work with independent living centers across the state. So next slide. A primary partner for us, and you'll hear from Lynn, is the Idaho Commission on Aging. And you can see that their aim is to create a statewide network of supports for seniors across Idaho and their caregivers. And you can see that they view caregivers much as we do. It's just if you are providing support or care to someone, it's a neighbor or a family member or a friend, and it doesn't have to be 24/7. It can be managing their medications or taking them to the grocery store. So there's a variety of things that are available from the Commission on Aging website, and Lynn will be speaking to you about that. They're also affiliated with the Commission on Aging are 6 area agencies on aging across the state. The whole state is covered by one of those areas on aging. And I'm not gonna get into that because Lynn will. So I don't know if there's one more slide for me. And this is just, we wanna recognize your mission, your vision, and we think that we align very closely with yours in terms of creating a caring community and sharing information to do that. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sheila.
Hi, everybody. And so when we were kind of pulling together this conversation to have, we got a lot of questions. We just had some questions around elder abuse. So I just want to splice in a little spot on elder abuse and kind of what it looks like right now here nationwide and in the state. So just what is elder abuse? It really is just that act or failure that creates harm to an older adult. Is really what that looks like at the end of the day. But we'll hop to the next slide. So there's a lot of different types of elder abuse, and I think we probably have a pretty good idea of what those kind of big ones look like physical abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse. We hear a lot about financial abuse in the state. Also too, we don't hear as much about kind of that self-neglect piece, and we might all know these people that are in their homes, not taking care of themselves, just kind of fading away. And that's what self-neglect looks like. That's kind of like those big main parts of that type of elder abuse. So we'll head on to the next slide. And these are just some of those signs. So I just had a doctor actually talk to me 2 days ago and said, gosh, I had this person come into my office. She was moved here from another state. Her son's saying a bunch of things that are really kind of bizarre that I'm worried about. So we start kind of going through these things, and we're hearing like, oh, this woman's very isolated. She's suddenly missing her glasses all of a sudden. She's losing weight. She's not getting her medical needs met. And so we were able to kind of look at this picture and go, oh, all these little red flags really lead to something. So we just kind of think about those signs of elder abuse. Unpaid bills is another big one too. We hear people like, well, they've got plenty of money, but we don't really know where it's going, what's going on, and there's somebody kind of floating around. So just some of these signs of elder abuse to kind of be aware of. And we'll go to the next slide here. So just some of the numbers on this, it's tremendous nationwide. I would lose over $2 billion each year lost of financial abuse. Unfortunately, over half of perpetrators of elder abuse are family members. I think it's good to know in this group, 1 out of 6 women have experienced abuse in the last year in that aging community. And those people become very vulnerable. We know that they're about 3 times at higher risk of death compared to their peers. So we'll go ahead and go on to that next slide there. Elder abuse is wildly unreported. So what we kind of hear about here is that psychological abuse, we just don't get reported a lot, it's hard to kind of prove, just it's hard. But I think where we're kind of bringing this in today is that caregiver neglect is very unreported and is a large piece of our puzzle. Because we hear those stories a lot from people of, well, I don't want to get my son in trouble, I don't want to get so-and-so in trouble, I don't want to get my paid caregiver in trouble, like, they're all I have, you know? So people are just kind of often looking to kind of not report, just make sure they're getting the care that they need. And we know you guys are doing that work around the workforce issue right now. That's what's happening. There's not enough people to do the work, and so people are in these horrible situations as a result. And so we don't always hear about that. So we'll go ahead and head on to that next slide there. Thank you so much for being the clicker today, by the way. I present on Zoom a lot, so I'm not practicing the clicker now. It's like, oh my gosh, you're just usually behind. But anyway, so just a quick spot on this. If you suspect elder abuse, the local area agency on aging is tasked with managing those elder abuse situations as they come up. If the situation is very serious, someone's in immediate danger, please call the police. And that is the phone number for our local area agency on aging, which covers this area. There's another other local organizations can assist is Faces of Hope. I suspect you've probably worked with them before, and the Napa Family Justice Center. Napa Family Justice Center in particular just got a pretty good sized grant, and they're doing a lot of that work on elder abuse right now, and are very concerned about that. I was just at a meeting with them 10 days ago. They have a full multidisciplinary team of law enforcement and social work and different people in that community that's just really doing a lot of that heavy lifting around elder abuse right now. So we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. So as we kind of take that shift to caregiving, then we're just thinking about how elder abuse impacts people, what that looks like, and it really kind of, I think, outlines that piece of family caregiving even more. But before I talk about caregiving, we kind of talked about our team already. I also want to make sure to recognize Susan Mock here today. She does a lot of work with our caregiver navigator team, working on some of that stress, traumatic stuff that's going on with our navigators. So I want to make sure to give a shout out to Susan today and thank her for her work with our team. It means a lot. So also too, when thinking about these statements that might kind of sound familiar, I'm spending more and more time managing medication for somebody in my life. I wish my siblings would help more in caring for my parent. I just need a little time to myself. I've cut back my hours at work to be able to take care of somebody. So often in rooms like this, we get to talk to people all the time. We get to hear from people that go, well, gosh, I don't know any people that are caregiving. And then we start talking about this and they're like, oh, I'm doing that. My neighbor's doing that. I know somebody that's doing that. So caregiving just isn't all about like helping people put on their shoes and helping them get around. It's a whole spectrum of things. And I suspect that a lot of people in this room can identify with some of these statements. So we'll go ahead and move on to that next slide then. And so I think that caregiver identification piece is huge, and really being able to talk about ourselves as caregivers or people around us. Because caregiving is often invisible. And so when we look at caregiving, more often than not, what often is at the front is that well-being of that care receiver. We're focused on that person that we're caring for. We want them to get better, we want them to progress, we want them to be safe. So we have that right at our forefront. But underneath that caregiver is often giving up a lot. They're giving up maybe their own educational and employment goals. They're putting social activities on the side, friends and family on the side, their own financial needs. Sometimes their own mental health is kind of getting sidelined for that. And so just thinking about that, supporting caregivers really supports the people that they're caring for. Because the more that we can really help meet some of these hidden needs, it's going to benefit the care receiver and all of us as a community. And we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So America has 53 million, I wish it was just 53, that would be very easy to solve. 53 million unpaid family caregivers. 1 in 4 Idahoans are caregivers at any given time. So something that we say often in our little neck of the woods is either you're going to be a caregiver, you're gonna know a caregiver, you're gonna need a caregiver, like we're all going to be impacted by caregiving at some point. And we'll go ahead and go to that next slide. So this is often, I know, so I kind of back up a step. So I've been with this project about a year, and prior to this I worked 7 years in child protection. So I think I had this view of what caregiving looked like. And it looked like these people. You know, well, these are older adults, maybe spouses that are caring for themselves, maybe professional caregivers, and this is what kind of caregiving looks like. So why would I think about it? But going on to that next slide, here's who they really are. We see a significant, those boomers are still kind of carrying that load, but the millennials and Gen X folks are coming up right behind them. And I believe the Gen Zs, I think, are also right behind them. And so we're just seeing this real range of people that are in these caregiving roles. 61% of women are in that caregiver role. We're seeing that come down a little bit though. Men are picking up the charge a little bit. So we're seeing more and more men in caregiving roles all the time. Almost half of them have had at least one financial impact. So they're cutting their hours to part-time. They're going to maybe move some bills around. They're gonna do something, or they just can't save because they're taking care of somebody else. This is a nationwide number of 61%. So 61% of caregivers nationwide are also working full or part-time at a paid job. And Idaho it's actually 70%. So people are caring for somebody in their lives, and they're also too working a lot. So we'll go ahead and go on to that next slide. So here at the Idaho Caregiver Alliance and within Family Caregiver Navigator, and I think a lot of people here, we really do seek to recognize that value of Idaho's caregivers. $2 billion in cost savings to Idaho annually. When I present this, somebody always says, are you sure it's not million? It is not million. It is billion with a B. So, because we think about those people, like, you know, when somebody's getting discharged from the hospital and they're not quite, you know, like their insurance isn't gonna work with a rehab, this isn't gonna go on, who do they go home to? They go home to those unpaid family caregivers. Or those youth, you know, that might need to be in a residential setting, but gosh, we can't quite pull this together to get them into some kind of treatment. So mom and dad have got them on top of their full-time jobs, on top of their parenting. They're also going to be like, you know, junior case manager and try to get all these things worked out with their kid that has these super high needs. That's also a caregiving role. And it's funny, I have a really close friend, and just last week their 10-year-old child was diagnosed with autism, and they've suddenly been thrown into this world of getting all these different assessments and trying to connect them to services and these different resources. And these are friends that I've had for 20 years, and I'm like, right, you guys are in that caregiving role now. And they both looked at me and they went, what are you talking about? You know, these are people that I've been close with for very many years. But I think that's just really can kind of think about what that looks like. And so, again, yeah, 70% are working full or part-time, and in our state, we're rocking about 300,000 unpaid family caregivers at any time. I'm going to go on to that next slide. This is a slide pre-COVID that we've just kind of kept, and I can't wait to see the post-COVID numbers, because I can't believe it's gotten better. But we really are hearing about those caregivers experiencing that declining health. So that percentage of caregivers who said things, yeah, I'm doing very good, I'm doing excellent, continues to drop. And I think even though some of us in non-caregiving roles might kind of have felt that drop in the last 4 years, 3 years, wherever we're at now with COVID, so it's not gotten any better for caregivers. So we'll go ahead and go on to that next slide. And just thinking about what caregivers are doing, they're not just helping, you know, put on shoes and getting people kind of around. They're really a vital part of that healthcare team. And they're the people that are calling the doctor's office and doing that advocating, trying to figure out, can we get him into this program? Can we pull this service off? They're monitoring the severity of the condition. We hear people who are monitoring different levels of things and trying to make sure this doesn't get infected, or this isn't going on, or where's their mental health at today or whatever. And again, just doing that bulk of the work, I'm communicating with healthcare professionals. So just really recognizing caregivers is just really a vital part of that team. And we'll go to the next slide. This is what caregiving looks like, it's kind of on a timeline here. So our caregivers are already working full or part-time, 70% of the time here in Idaho. And then they're also putting in caregiving, 24 hours a week of caregiving on top of what they're already doing. And a lot of them are doing this actually full-time. So they're doing full-time, full or part-time work, then they're coming home and keep on caregiving. And these are actually post-COVID numbers. So over half of our caregivers didn't feel like they had a choice. It's just like, well, someone's got to do it. I can't let them suffer. I can't do this. Or they're living in my home, so I guess it's me, right? So, the bulk of them are also not utilizing any paid help. And I think part of that is just due to a couple different reasons. I think there is some potential of concerns around that workforce shortage. We just can't find anybody to do the work. Also, too, caregivers, we talk to a lot of people that go, gosh, I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to, caregivers just really care deeply about the community. They think they've got it, they can handle it, don't worry about it. It's my job, my duty. We'll go ahead and go on to that next slide. So, and again, over half of our caregivers would not have identified as caregivers prior to the pandemic, which I think is just super interesting. And it makes me wonder if people were just sitting at home and going, oh, I'm not trying to work from home. I've got my dog in the background and I've got all these other people that I'm caring for. I can't leave them during the day now. And wow, and we're also hearing from our caregivers that are feeling very lonely or isolated post-COVID, or just kind of that, or even during COVID, particularly with millennials and Gen Xers just feeling really lonely. And I think we might be able to relate to that here in the room, and our caregivers are also very impacted by that. So we'll go on to that next slide. So as a result, over half of our caregivers report experiencing significant levels, like clinically significant level of stress, anxiety, depression. So what are they doing? They're coping with alcohol, they're coping with medication, they're coping with food. So just a lot of really maladaptive coping mechanisms that are happening in that caregiver world. I do want to kind of unpack that medication piece. We are hearing that it is prescribed and non-prescribed medication. So that's kind of what that looks like. So we'll be borrowing stuff. In my other life, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor. We could talk about that for a long time, but today we're sticking with that one slide. So anyway, go ahead. All right, so I'm gonna pass it off to Adrian. He has got some great, he's doing some great work. I can't wait for you guys to hear about it. So go ahead, Adrian.
I'm just gonna move over here. As Sheila said, we're very accustomed to doing this on Zoom, so how can I work people
Great
along?
people, yeah.
So as she said, my name is Adrian Rodriguez, and a lot of my work at the Center for the Study of Aging is on Hispanics, so I'm gonna go over a little bit of that today. But first, we want to recognize that caregiving looks different for all minorities and all groups. They all have different experiences. Our Black and Latinx caregivers provide more in-home care than any of their white counterparts. Our immigrant caregivers are kind of doing that double duty. 11% of immigrants make up the home health, so official caregiving. They're doing that as a job. And at the same time, 26% of them are also doing that as informal, taking care of a loved one, so doing that double duty. Millennial caregivers, such as myself, I was a caregiver for my father, and provide support someone with a mental health condition and also are more likely to be working at the same time. So I was in school and working as well, so I can definitely relate to that. Our LGBT caregivers provide the most care in general at the highest rates in the general population. Next slide, please. And again, kind of going back to my research, we recognize that the Idaho Caregiver Alliance, that Idaho has a large Hispanic community, and so we want to know what are Hispanics experiencing. So that's what a lot of my research is centered around. And what we're finding out is that Hispanics receive, in general, the fewest information or resources when it comes to caregiving, Alzheimer's disease and those types of dementias. A lot of this could be just a language barrier. Sometimes it's not available in Spanish. They also report more financial impacts due to caregiving. They're also relatively young, so the average age is 43 years old. That's kind of, before I started working with the center, younger than what I had envisioned, what a caregiver looks like. The slides earlier that Sheila was showing us. Next slide, please. And so, what we know is we really want to make an equitable program, our Family Caregiver Navigator program. We want it to be equitable for all Idahoans, and so we realize that just aging populations in the United States are growing more diverse. A program that's made for the majority population isn't going to work for minorities most often, and then also they tend to have their own little enclaves there with their own unique barriers and cultural values. Next slide, please. And so in the US, the number of Hispanics is expected to increase from 3 million to 17.5 million in the next 3 decades. And actually that number has gone higher. I think it's more closer to 19 million. I just looked at it the other day. This research was done a year ago, last year. So stuff is constant, the demographics are constantly changing. So we want to be prepared for a more diverse and older population, and how can we address their needs. By 2016, 1 in 5 older adults will be Hispanic. This is important to us to know in the caregiving world, the Idaho Caregiver Alliance, because Hispanics are at a greater disparity when it comes to Alzheimer's diagnosis. They are 1.5 more times likely to develop Alzheimer's disease and related dementias than their non-Hispanic white counterparts. Because of this, it's estimated that 1 in 4 Hispanics who are currently not a caregiver will become a caregiver in the next 2 years. So yeah, 1 in 4 of us, if we're all Hispanic here, 1 in 4 will be a caregiver. And I'm kind of a data nerd, so I get excited about this. And the number of Hispanics with Alzheimer's is estimated to reach 3.5 million by 2060. Next slide, please. And so that's kind of like why I wanted to do some research, and this is what we found, is that Hispanics experience unique barriers. And although our research was more specific to caregiving, it can also be applied to similar programs, public health and social service programs, hoping to do outreach within Hispanic communities. Hispanics have a lower socioeconomic status. Typically, you don't come to this country with 401ks and life savings. Unfortunately, I don't have a trust fund or anything, so my dad just came here with whatever he could come with, like literally that visual, whatever he could pack in his backpack, that's it. So we do have a typically social local economic status because we're pretty relatively new to this country. Language is a huge barrier. One of the main ones that's reported as a barrier, not just the lack of items available in Spanish, but also like the cultural competence. There's an intersect between language and cultural competence. Some of the words that we use, such as in our caregiver world, such as burden, respite, coping, go against strong traditional Hispanic values that govern service utilization and caregiver roles. So we're finding out, we can't use these same terms that we're currently using when we're trying to address Hispanic populations. It just goes against their values and it might close them off. Cultural competency also. Hispanic caregivers report a lack of culturally and linguistically acceptable services and resources. Legal status is a major one as well. The fear of deportation is huge. In fact, Polded has an amazing petition going on, Manejando Sin Miedo, Driving Without Fear, that hopes to address this. But yes, the fear of being separated from your family because you're driving undocumented, going to doctor's appointments, is very real, and it keeps people from going and seeking those services, Hispanics. Insurance coverage, 41% of Hispanic caregivers lack good health insurance coverage. 55% report affordability of care as a barrier to Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, healthcare. Next slide, please. However, the good news is, going to those cultural values that I mentioned earlier that are so strong within Hispanic communities, they really have helped us understand what is driving service utilization and the caregiver role, to help us better develop programs to address these communities. Familismo or familism, personalismo or personalism. These are strong cultural values that explain that Hispanics are why they might be kind of closed off outside of their close family relationships and close networks, close friends. Respect governs the way that we Hispanics not only interact with nieces, nephews, uncles, aunts, grandparents. It also interacts how we, it governs how we interact with health professionals, health organizations. Marianismo, Marianism is derived from the Virgin Mary. It's the female gender role that's governed by qualities of selflessness, devotion, patience, and sacrifice. So you can see how this cultural value goes directly against those other words from the previous slide: burden, respite. Well, the Catholic religion and Hispanic culture, due to Marianism, Marianismo, it's not a burden, right? It's your duty. So it kind of really helps us shape that language that we're using. Machismo, the opposite of Marianism, the traditional role that provides males more freedom. At its extreme, it's the belief that men are superior to women. Helps us understand why it's always typically, not always, but why it's usually the females doing the caregiver roles, and what that looks like in households. Dignidad. Hispanics have the innate, believe in the innate worth and integrity of all people, and they like to present themselves as dignified people, especially in public settings. What does that mean when it comes to caregiving? Well, it means that maybe hospice care, or even talking about the disease, may take away the loved one's dignity. So that's something to consider as well. Next slide, please. And yeah, from here I'll give it back over to Sheila.
All right, thank you for that, Adrian. I love that chunk of the presentation. I just love hearing about that, so thank you. All right, so kind of thinking about, we've given you a lot of news that isn't fantastic, so what can we do? All right, I'm going to go on to that next slide there. So when we kind of think about what we can do, I like to kind of start with, what are caregivers asking for? So family caregiver navigator, and I think we can all speak to this. This is what we're hearing a lot. People want support. They want to know, like, how do I physically do the thing that I'm supposed to do? Navigating systems, sometimes it's just a matter of, my kid just got this diagnosis, like, who do I call? Like, what does this look like? Or I'm trying to figure out this thing with health and welfare, but it doesn't match up with Medicaid, which are the same thing. It doesn't match up with Medicaid, doesn't match up with this community organization, like, how do we kind of square the circle here? What do we do here? Transport's a huge thing. I think in my entire career as a social worker, and even prior to that, I just dream of the day that we'll have one day in the state of Idaho a way to get a person from point A to point B without them being harmed at a reasonable price. It's been very tricky, and I found out. Let's see here. And then that financial legal piece, just there's a lot of caveats when it comes to caregiving, like, how do I claim this on my taxes? Like, this is a chunk of money, we want to spend it down. Do we spend it down? What does this look like? So that financial piece, just somebody to talk to sometimes. Again, around that isolation, sometimes people are just like, I've got things figured out. Can we just give you 10 minutes? I want to tell someone a story. We'll do that. We'll hear about respite a lot, of course. People need breaks. Here in this valley, we're hearing more and more, well, not even just valley, we're hearing a lot from East Idaho too, around housing options. So we're hearing these stories of people that are saying, like, I'm on the wrong side of Mountain Home, and I'm 4 months behind in rent in this rickety trailer, and I've got 3 people here that I'm caring for. What are we supposed to do? So we're hearing that it's really impact caregiving more and more, this housing crisis we've all kind of been hearing about. And then flexible employers. People aren't explicitly saying, I need a flexible employer, but they are trying to figure out, like, how do I talk to my boss about this? Like, what does this look like? Like, I've had to take all this time off. We're also hearing about employment when we come and talk to agencies. A lot of the time we'll go in and talk to an agency and they'll say, gosh, we don't really serve caregivers here. We're a mental health agency, so we don't have caregivers here. But we have this office manager who's been out for 3 days, the last 3 weeks, taking care of her dad. Can you, like, fix her, please? So we're hearing that, from a couple different angles, right? Of just going. So we know that employers, if 70% of people that are caregiving are working, then their employers are being impacted. So we could talk for the whole other presentation. Happy to come back sometime talking about a flexible workplace, caregiver-friendly workplaces, because it's just a lot we can do that really support employees. And we know too with this kind of crisis that we're in around workforce, if we can really again support those caregivers, it supports people they're caring for. It also kind of pays back a dividend if you're an employer trying to employ people. That's what they're asking for. So go ahead and go on to that next slide. All right. So something we can really do to support caregivers and identifying as caregivers. I just love this quote. So analysis suggests that a recognition of oneself as a caregiver is produced primarily through interactions with others. Without external influence, family members will often see the work they are doing as simply an extension of their relational role. So I just want to unpack that. This is what we're supposed to be doing. I'm her grandma, I'm her mom, I'm her son, I'm his neighbor, whatever. We're supposed to be doing this, right? So they just really see themselves as that's what we're supposed to be doing, it's just part of our role. But affiliating oneself as a family caregiver appears to have positive benefits, which include promoting effective use of community support services and creating a sense of belonging and connection to a broader community. This can be empowering. So when people start to go, oh, I am a caregiver, that's why I feel like I'm a caregiver, and start connecting to things that will be helpful, it can be a game changer for folks. So we'll go ahead and go on to that next slide. So I kind of just want to give you some profiles of caregivers that we see the Idaho caregiver lines. These are not real people, there's no HIPAA thing going on, like this can possibly. So I did take a picture of Carlos, I don't know who that guy is, he lives in Stockholm somewhere. But anyway, so we see people like Carlos, in his early 30s. Carlos is a working professional that lives at home, so he can take care of dad. He has health problems, but just like to see the doctor. And think of what Adrian just said, we might know why now, right? And he's looking out for everybody in his family. And he really just feels like he needs to be kind of the head of his family and be there for people. And he's concerned that he can't find resources in Spanish for his father. So that's that caregiver we might not have thought about as a caregiver initially. And then we think of the Lacey's of the world. I think of Lacey living somewhere like Arcro or Whitebird or Glens Ferry or some other little Idaho community. She's a young first-time mom in a rural area with a child who was diagnosed with severe disabilities. Her partner works full-time and she's trying to kind of take care of things at home, nannying, trying to make some extra money that way. Where we might see Lacey at, if we are a mental health professional or somewhere in that world or touch up against that domain at all, she's had some mental health stuff go on in the past, and she's just like, this is gonna push me over the edge. I'm gonna crack. I don't know what to do. Let's go on to that next slide. But then we see those more traditional folks we might think about a little more. So we see the Dales, whose wife had Parkinson's disorder, who has Parkinson's disease. And they had big plans for retirement that didn't involve his wife having Parkinson's disease. So now he suddenly become very overwhelmed, preparing for the future, and just transitioning from that husband to caregiver has been emotionally taxing. Somebody that we see a lot of here are people like Leah, because we know that our kinship rates are higher than the national average here in the state. So she took guardianship of her grandson with special needs. She wasn't planning on being a parent again. She has her own health problems and might be concerned about her grandson's future. And is just saying, how am I gonna retire? How am I gonna maintain my current lifestyle? I'd be willing to bet there's somebody in this room asking themselves that question right now, like I took my grandkid, now what? What am I supposed to do, So just kind of thinking about these people that we're working with. And we'll go on to that next slide. So how are we supporting them? And keep on going. All right, now I'll pass it off to Lynn from the Idaho Commission on Aging, who has great information for us.
Okay, all right. Well, first, I'm Lynn Fines, and I'm a 26-year retired active duty veteran. So I kind of aged out of the military, so my next step was probably going into something like Idaho Commission on Aging. So, first, I'm curious, how many of you have ever heard of the Commission on Aging or the area agencies on aging? Oh, that's good. That's really good to hear. So I want to give you a little bit of background about Idaho's Aging Support Network. For starters, the commission is charged.
Could you speak up a little bit, please?
You guys are outside boys.
Yes, today I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Idaho's Aging Network. For starters, Idaho Commission on Aging is charged with planning, implementing, and evaluating a network of services to help older Idahoans live safe, healthy, and self-directed lives in their homes and communities of choice. Funded through the Older Americans Act are 6 area agencies on aging, Idaho Senior Centers, and assorted service providers all have a role to play in supporting older Idahoans and caregivers and their caregivers. So I've included a copy of the Idaho's annual report over there on the table. There's a couple copies that kind of shows you all the services that are provided through the commission in the area and their fiscal and the fiscal report. So it's kind of interesting to see the services that are provided and where they're located and things like that. So this is an interesting pamphlet. Idaho Commission's website has an array of resources. For instance, the Caregiver Stay Educated section offers locally developed dementia skills training, and hosts AARP's caregiver skills modules. There's a news and events section, which shows the powerful tools for caregivers workshops that teach us how to navigate family dynamics, improve communication skills, set goals, and connect with other caregivers. There's resources like the memory cafes, the technology classes, and other free local webinars that are sponsored by LEARN and the Alzheimer's Association of Idaho. Additionally, the Idaho, the website here hosts some Stay Healthy classes. They're also charged with prevention, health prevention classes and services like that. And they'll have them in local libraries around. Our 6 area agencies on aging are located throughout the state. Actually, I think we can go to the next slide.
Maybe one more, we haven't heard of.
There you go. Our 6 area agencies on aging, they're located throughout the state, and they assist with empowering and educating caregivers with services available that can help support their own well-being and connect them to a support system that can help reduce their stress, their social isolation, and possibly their caregiver burden. This slide provides the AAA contact information across the state and other resources like legacy support or powerful tools for caregiver contacts, and of course the caregiver navigator information. Next slide, please. Additionally, I want to take some time to show you how our area agency support groups are a great way to connect and educate caregivers. In Idaho, we have over 10,500 grandparents raising children under the age of 18 who take on the role of parenting. And this can be challenging legally, financially, and emotionally, as you can imagine. Our area agencies hold monthly support groups and activities for kidships and grandparents raising grandchildren. Our Area 3 here locally has both English and Spanish supports. And a few of the guest speakers in 2022 included the Nampa police detective who spoke on internet security, a guardianship specialist, financial planning for kinship caregivers. There was a motivational speaker who was a former Idaho judge who was raised by his grandparents. And some of the more fun activities include, there's family picnics in the park, Dr. Seuss Library Day, and our most recent roller skating party. So let's keep in mind, there are over 620 area agencies on aging across the United States. So you can use them as a recommended resource for your friends or other family members. That's all I have. And I do have some resources over there on the table, that some good stuff there.
Thank you, that's great, and thank you. And thank you for your work with the Area Agency on Aging. You guys do such great work over there. I was a kid that was raised by my grandparents, and so we tried okay sometimes, most of the time I'd like to think. And so I just wish I had access to those resources in Little Old Mountain Home many years ago. So it's so cool to see that. Yeah, so anyway, so back to kind of what my role is then. So I am I'm the project manager now. I was the lead coordinator yesterday, and I'm the project manager today. We got a little change, a little shift of chairs. So same job, new title, I think. So anyway, so I'm the project manager of the Family Caregiver Navigator Project. So we receive our funding through through a grant written by the Idaho Commission on Aging. It's money follows the person through Medicaid. Which is really where our funding comes from. So we are still a pilot project, but what we are a free low barrier service. And so free is true, low barrier is also true. And so what low barrier means, I often think of the social worker like, well, right, but you've got to have like a certain kind of insurance. So you've got to qualify. You've got to have some kind of thing to be able to pull it off. You've got to speak English, right? None of those are true. Once you identify the caregiver, that's the big part, we'll work with you. I guess our only catch is that we really try to serve people over the age of 18. We're not seeing a lot of young caregivers, but 18 and up is kind of the parameters of what we're working in. So pretty wide swath. Everybody in this room, I think, qualifies over 18, with maybe one exception. They have already left. So anyway, but yeah, we serve caregivers across the lifespan. So again, kind of including those students, like a college or on a university campus. We're seeing those college students more and more. We've had a couple of stories of like students having to drop out of college, you know, because they are caring for somebody in their life. I'm an adjunct professor at the university, and we had a young girl in my class last semester that was just completely like deluged by caregiving. She's like this 20-year-old kid, like caring for, as an immigrant caregiver, caring for all these people in her life, and it's just like, man, it just impacts so many people. So what we do is really that individualized care plan and resource referral by telephone. We're set up for Zoom. We just think people are kind of zoomed out, so it seems to be over the phone more often than not. And again, we're just doing that navigation support where we're connecting people to resources, kind of doing that planning process, just really trying to connect people where they're at and get them what they need so they can be a successful caregiver. We do utilize an evidence-based intervention. It's really important to us, kind of having that academic base, that we are doing things that are evidence-based. We're not just kind of coming up with on the fly. And again, any adult who supports somebody with a physical, intellectual, cognitive disability or any kind of condition can participate. It really is just around that caregiver identification piece. We try to remain very accessible to people. That is our goal, is not to have people, we don't want anyone to call and go, oh yeah, sorry, we can't help you for some inane reason that we came up with, so maybe try somebody else that we don't know who to send you to. We really do try to work with people. And we'll go ahead and go to that next slide. This is what we look like. We just celebrated, my gosh, a little over 2-year anniversary. Since then, over 600 caregivers have been in contact with the navigator, and then that just continues down the line. So we're entering those things into our system, we're doing those follow-up assessments, and just doing those care plans. So again, that's just kind of coming through our door right now, and those numbers keep popping up every day. And on to the next slide. This is what our model looks like. So for anybody who's worked in social services, this may look like a very familiar model. But initially, we kind of have that T-care, that screening process, or our evidence-based system is called T-care. So that's our initial screening process. And then we have that triage and crisis support through that assessment process. So we're just getting the story. What's going on? What does this look like? What can we get for you right now? So some folks, they come in, they get what they need, and they're out. So they exit the circle. But sometimes they don't. So then we can kind of move them on to that care planning process, where we really are developing those goals and interventions. Something that we really try to champion is that, through our information and referral, is that warm handoff process. So what we don't want to do is have a caregiver call us or be referred to us or whatever's happened, and then we go, okay, well, here's 5 phone numbers to call. We hope they work for you. Caregivers already have a list of phone numbers to call and things to do. So like, for example, if we have somebody coming in with a need around Alzheimer's and dementia, we're gonna call our friend Yvette over at the Alzheimer's Association and go, hey, Yvette, can you call Bob? He called about his wife today and he wants to know more. And that way we try to flip that around. So it's a warm handoff whenever we can. It seems to work really well for caregivers. Also that ongoing engagement. So we want to really maintain that caregiver and navigator connection. So we'll do those check-ins. Sometimes we just not too long ago, one of our navigators, she was calling this person every single week, just kind of touch, because she was really concerned about him. That's not typical, but at least once every 3 months, we are doing that follow-up process to kind of determine next steps. So what this looks like then in the grand scheme of things is people can stay looped in the circle for as long as they want to be looped in for it, and we just keep that caregiver at the middle of our circle at all times. This is what that looks like. That's the overall model. So go ahead and go on to that next slide. This is what it looks like. I realize the little circles are very light gray and it's very strange looking in here. So this little light gray world is what white is. So, but when we look at it, that we see a nice drop in that stress and depression. And so with both of those, it's not clinically diagnosed depression. It's just those sad thoughts of like, man, I thought I was gonna retire and get an RV and do all these fun things, and now I'm, chief nurse in my house. Like this is hard, That's what we're talking about when we're hearing that, and kind of that decrease in stress as well. I think as everyone kind of survives, it's very hard, very stressful to be a caregiver. We're also seeing a really nice drop in identity discrepancy. So what that is that negative psychological state that happens when people become caregivers. And so I often think back to this gentleman I worked with several months ago now, and poor folk have heard this story 100 times, so I apologize. About this gentleman, he called in and he goes, my dad and I, he was like my best friend. We talked about parenting, we were fishing buddies, like we had this great life, and now I'm helping him in the bathroom and giving him rides everywhere. Like, who am I now? Like, what am I doing here? Am I a caregiver? Am I a son? Like, what am I doing? that is identity discrepancy. And so when we can really, again, help people identify, connect to those resources, that can come down. And on to that next slide. And these are just some of these nice little testimonials. I wanted to do it all prior to the help, prior to this help, completely changed my caregiving style. My personal favorite is it made it clear that I have to take care of myself. And this kind of dovetails off into this woman, and we still see her kind of bebopping around at caregiver conferences. But she was kind of one of the first people that worked with Family Caregiver Navigator, I think, a little before my time even. And she had told the navigator, like, I just feel sluggish, I'm stuck in this house, this is so hard. And the navigator somehow kind of connected her back to this program that her insurance already had, like this kind of like, it's kind of like healthcare, kind of like a wellness, kind of walking, fitness, you know, nutrition program. And she lost like 23 pounds, like in a period of time. So she'd always come to conferences and events and say, Family Caregiver Navigator, help me lose 23 pounds. That is not what we're doing, but I think it really, I can't promise that, but it has happened. But I think it really does speak to that, you know, like what can happen when we have to put that focus kind of back on ourselves and go, okay, I have to, if I'm gonna be here for the person I'm caring for, I've gotta be here for me and what that can really look like. So I just think, and again, I think it speaks to, we know anybody who's tried to do anything here in the state, supports can be very limited. Government programs and social service agencies can be tricky to access at times. So when we can go, you already have this, let's just get you connected to it. Like she already had it, we just needed to kind of help her kind of think through it for a minute. So it's kind of cool. But on to that next slide. So when we think back to some of these caregivers, we think about a Carlos and a Lacey. So what are we gonna do for Carlos? Well, we can get him connected to the respite. We can get him connected to respite. Idaho Commission on Aging has that respite set up. Just really talking about like Carlos, who else is there for you? Like you know, he can't do everything. You know, what can we do there? Kind of help him with those transportation resources. We know the transportation resources are limited. We're going to get him connected where we can and kind of figure out what at least that can look like. And then again, just keep that communication going. And then we think of somebody like Elise. We're going to connect her to those parenting agencies and the people that are doing the work. We're going to give her that education on, you know, what it's like to manage a kiddo with a disability. And for somebody like Lacey who has that kind of underlying mental health stuff going on, we're going to connect her to a counselor with expertise in caregiving. Free tip today, Tree City Counseling has a whole kind of, one of their big focuses is on caregivers. So they have a whole, if you go to their website, it says caregiving. So they have specialties around caregivers in particular. They're a good agency to know about. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. And then we think about Dale and Liam, which may have been some of those folks we were thinking about at the beginning. We're going to connect Dale to the American Parkinson's Disease Foundation. And this is kind of a composite of a real case, but I've never worked with Parkinson's Disease Foundation in my life, and I called them and said, hey, I work for this program. Do you guys like do stuff here? Oh my gosh, yeah, we do. We have a support group. We're doing all this stuff. Like, please connect us. So we're able to kind of make those connections sometimes, and people just can't, you know. And again, we're going to look at those financial supports. We're going to figure out, like, Dale's got to make some decisions. Like, what are they going to do with their retirement money? Like, what's going to happen? So kind of working through those pieces. And then we think of Aaliyah. We're going to refer to Powerful Tools for Caregiving. We're going to get her connected to our friends over at Kinship Support and education on how to obtain that kinship grant. It's tons of money. I think it's $350 a month, so it's enough to raise all your grandkids, you know, but we're going to give them what we can, right? So yeah, on to that next slide. And again, everything at Family Caregiver Navigator, we speak Spanish. I do not speak Spanish, I will rephrase that. We have Spanish-speaking navigators on staff. We have Adrian here, and then we have also Ana Villanueva. And all of our materials over on that table are in English and Spanish. If you pick something up and you're like, why is this in Spanish? That is why. It's also in English. So hablamos español. And then we will go on to that next slide. We're always looking for new caregivers. Something we really kind of have that barrier with is, I'm not a caregiver, I'm just taking care. When I worked in foster care, I think back to this woman that I worked with, and she'd been caring for her brother with multiple sclerosis for 30 years in her home. He like had a bedroom in her home, and then she had taken on her granddaughter in foster care that had these huge behavioral needs and a lot going on there. She's like, well, I'm not a caregiver though. I'm just taking care of all these people in my life and eating everything that I have, you know. But I'm not a caregiver, so we struggle with that. So we always try to tell people like, hey, send us in our direction, you know, send them in our direction, see what we can do, you know. We don't have all the answers, but we have some of the answers, and we're another support people. And we'll go into that next slide. We're trying to keep the referral process really clean. If you hop on our website, you can just really hit that blue button, refer a caregiver, short form. We'll call them. Takes it off your hands. Thank you. And then just that screening process too. So got info piece, all of that. So go ahead and go on to that next slide. And I'm going to, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I'm gonna wrap it up with the always wonderful Marilyn Sword. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sheila.
Mhm.
This, I'm just gonna take a couple of minutes with it. This is a tool that, we've done workshops on, but it's a really handy tool for caregivers to go through the process of drawing a care map. And those of you involved in social services have seen something like this, I'm sure. But how it's helpful is it shows visually kind of what your caregiving situation is. Where are the holes? Where are the gaps? Who's caring for you versus who's helping you care for the person you're caring for? Where's your brother in this picture? How come he's not in here? Those kinds of things. And it's something that you can take and give to the care recipient's doctor and have them put in the patient file. It's something you can use to have discussions with other family members about, I could use some help here. And so if any of you are ever interested in the care map process, doing a care map, you can see at the bottom, the Atlas of Caregiving, it provides some kind of steps you go through. But we also do workshops that are very interactive and last probably about an hour and 15 minutes on how to draw your own care map. So your takeaway is a care map that you can take home. So that's a care map. That's another tool that we use. That's next slide.
And I can take this. Alrighty, so let's see here. That's right. Back to me for a second. Yeah, so just really quickly, even if we're not professionals, these are just some of these, or whatever, whoever we are in the sphere, these are just some of these things that we can do within our own community to really support caregivers. So just thinking about, like, encourage them to meet their own health care needs. I love to harp on that, just because we meet caregivers that say, well, I took my person to the doctor 3 times last week, but I haven't seen a dentist in 2 years, and so just kind of think about things we can do, listening to their needs, transportation, keep them feeling included. They're still people, right? So keep them in. Workplace, again, kind of really comes up. I think folks in this room might be in those positions of being in management or have workplaces. It's a good thing to know about. We'll go on to that next slide. And again, I just really want to thank everybody here at the Idahoans Charitable Foundation for inviting us here today. And I have a sense that a lot of people are impacted by the work we're doing in one way or another, or you're supporting caregivers, you are a caregiver, whatever's going on. So we're kind of still at that first part of the year. So I think it's just a nice reminder to kind of check in with ourselves, kind of that we want to simplify going outside. It's kind of this cool little tiny survival guide from the Trauma Stewardship Institute that I like to share. So again, but just so thank you, and I'm seeing a lot of notes and writing, and I love it. I'm used to kind of working in 2 other spheres. I teach at the university, and then I run drug and alcohol classes, and they never take notes. They're always, it's nice to see them people taking notes. Very unfamiliar to me. So yeah, but thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you wanna write your questions on those cards and pass them to the ouch side, Joanne and Jenna are gonna pick those up. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna invite Dara up, and she's gonna give you a preview of, what we have coming in Caregiving Part 2, which is completely different, but the same, a little bit. And just to remind you that all of the slides and a list of resources, along with a recording of the presentation, will be posted on our website. So if you need to refer back, or what was it they mentioned, you can just go to the IWCF website, and they'll be posting that under the education tab.
So thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dara Ray, and I am a family caregiver. Oh wait, this isn't a 12-step group. Actually, maybe it is, right? Because I am a family caregiver, and that's at the root of why I'm in front of you today. But I didn't identify myself as a family caregiver until maybe 5 or 6 years ago by that name. I called myself daughter, great niece, granddaughter, wife, mother, friend, co-worker, neighbor, but I am a family caregiver. And I challenge that you are too. The presentation that we are offering next Wednesday, and by Zoom, it's a class, an educational class. My colleague Dee Childers and I present. My business is My Care Companions, and we help families and caregivers navigate kind of the business side and the business questions of care, and navigating finances and legal and household management, and kind of those general, lots of daughters my age are worried about these things, helping people pay bills, and how do you do that, and what documents do you need, that kind of stuff. My colleague, Dee Childers, is a geriatric care manager, and she specializes in helping people put care plans in place, and healthcare, and family communication elements and things like that. And we have developed a program called Winning Strategies for Family Caregiving, Lessons from Family Game Night. So we invite you to come join us for an interactive education session where we think through the rules of the caregiving game, some key strategies for successfully managing family caregiving, and then we play a Jeopardy-style game board with family games that we use as analogies to help you think through the realities of care and coming to grips with what it is you're facing, the way to communicate with your family and with your loved one about care, family dynamics. How do you navigate successfully? What are some tools and things you can do to navigate those realities of family dynamics? I don't know a functional family. Anyone? I mean, every family I know has some kind of dysfunction. So how do you navigate that successfully as family caregivers and as a team of caregivers? How do you navigate and consider various health matters, various financial matters and legal matters, and importantly then, taking care of yourself as the caregiver? These are the concepts we're going to think through with you, but we do it in a really super fun way and a really interactive way. And I will give you an example. So when we think about family game night, throw out some games for me. What are some of the games you think about when you play with your family? Charades is a good one. What's another one? Clue.
Scrabble.
Okay, Scrabble. All right, anybody play a game? We've got a bunch of those. Anybody know the game Would You Rather? Anybody heard that game? So Would You Rather is this more modern game. It's kind of like Apples to Apples or some of these other things where it's very interactive around the dining room table. And Would You Rather asks questions like these. You pull a card and it says, would you rather, okay everybody, think about this, paint the outside of your house with a paintbrush the size from a child's paint set, or mow your lawn with nail clippers? Would you rather? Which one would you rather?
Paint.
Okay, there's a paint. Anybody want a clip? Okay, both answers are right. In the reality of caregiving, you will be faced with equivalently awful choices, right? You're not gonna have good choices all the time. You're gonna be asked, would you rather do horrible thing A or horrible thing B? Well, how do you manage that? How do you think through that? When have you faced that kind of a situation as a family caregiver? And what tools might you use as a family to assess those two less than optimal options? Our goal is to help you be thinking about the things you may come across and to leave you with some nuggets of how to address those as you face them, and to do it in a way that you'll remember, because I guarantee you the next time you are faced with two equally horrible things, you're gonna say, oh my gosh, that's would you rather, right? So that's our goal. So would you rather? So I'm gonna play one more game. We don't keep score in our caregiving game, but I'm gonna ask you to keep score. And this comes back to, am I a family caregiver? So I would like you to give yourself a point for all the members of your household. If you have 5 people living in your household, you just got 5 points. Okay, you with me? Okay, now you get an additional point for each person who has special needs of any kind in that household. It could be an infant with care needs, child with care needs, an elder with care needs living in your household. Okay, ready? Everybody still with me? Okay, now give yourself a point for every person outside of your household that's now not a family member that you help. Neighbor, friend, maybe you grocery shop, you to give them rides somewhere, you accompany them to a doctor's appointment. Okay, everybody said people running out of fingers. Okay, now I want you to give yourself a point for any adults in training that are still in your life. These are otherwise known as college students and adults under the age of 26. They might not live with you, but they're still on your insurance, you're still paying for something, so every adult in training, and now a point for every pet.
Oh, God.
They're family members, right? Okay, I wanna know who has, anybody here with a score of 1? Just yourself? Score of 1. What's that?
Count my dog.
Oh, that's 2. But you're 2, that's you and your dog. What's your score? 1?
What?
Okay, well, just you. Who's got a score above 10? 4 people in the room. I mean, everyone is a family caregiver, even if you're just caring for yourself. Because when you're just caring for yourself, whether you're a family of 1 or a score of 10, you have to navigate. You need to know the resources. You need to know the questions and consider the questions that you will be faced yourself, and do everything you can to be prepared to face that reality. And I will leave you with this thought. As prepared as you can possibly think you are, you're not. And I say that to you as a bit of a, just in case. On January 2nd, we brought my father-in-law home on home hospice. And I have been on the street in Weiser, helping coordinate care and get cares in place for him to help him live his best life that he can for the rest of his life. And as much as I know, and as much as I teach, and as many people as I know, and as hard as I knew it would be, it's harder. So please join us to think through these topics and begin to think about how you can help yourself and help your family be more successful as family caregivers. Thanks.
Question?
Yeah, I'll let you guys do the questions, if you would just read them out loud before you answer them, so that we know what the question was. And just a quick reminder that you will be getting your this week email, and through that, you can register for next week's presentation with Dara.
I'll go first. Okay, so the first question I have here is, if we need to find a caregiver now or in the near future, what should we do to hire or arrange for a caregiver? It's a really good question. So my first recommendation is, over there's some really good resources. There's the ARP Caregiver Guide and the Senior Blue Book. So that's a good place to start looking for caregiver resources in your community. Also think about, on our website, we have a Prepare to Care. It's an ARP Prepare to Care guide, and it'll walk you through the steps of, what do you look for in a caregiver? What's important to you or your family member? Those are important things to consider. So really start thinking about those things, as you start thinking about hiring a caregiver. For instance, my mother lived in a community called Leisuregrove back east, and it's a retirement community. So there's 20,000 people that live in this community, and they put out a weekly paper. And I'll tell you what, there's all kinds of caregivers in this community. So we started our interview process and made phone calls, looked at recommendations, sat down with them, interviewed them, talked to them, and I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. There's a direct care work shortage, So you may want to be creative. Look around you. Look in your community. Look at your neighbors potentially. The Area Agency on Aging offers a consumer-directed respite program where we pay you to find somebody in your support network to provide care. And then you can take a 2-hour break and get paid. You're financially, at least you're paid to take a break, and you can pay the caregiver or your neighbor for a couple of hours. So that's a really good question, and that's kind of my advice on the caregiving front. But then I had another question that, for me, I read this and, okay, any explanation for Native Americans be more likely to pay for caregiving? And anything we can learn from this trend? So my first question is, my first thought is, I know a lot of Native American elders take care of the younger generations. So this question made me think, okay, so we're talking about health issues, like I understand a lot of Native Americans may have dialysis problems, chronic health issues. So I think we can address this trend from a preventive, a more preventive, health preventive approach. So I'm not sure who asked this question.
It was me, it was for Adrian, it was on his slide, of all of his slides, it said Native Americans and
Right.
Alaska Natives are more likely to pay for caregiving, which, I mean, culturally, it makes me wonder why, and, I mean, I'm currently dealing with two parents who are resistant to pay caregiving, so I'm like, please, how do I get the
Right, yeah, that's interesting.
Adrian did a report that all this is drawn from, and that's available.
That is
On
on
our
our website. I think
It's on our-
it's one of the links actually around Hispanic caregiving in particular, around Native American caregiving. That's actually a number from the AARP. They were talking about that Native American caregiver piece, and so,
But there, I didn't know if there was something in that report that might dig a little deeper.
yeah.
Yeah, I think
Helps
it's
answer
interesting.
your question, yeah.
Do you guys have resources for incredibly strong, reluctant parents? Because,
No.
I mean, I
You're
try
my
to
best
care,
friend.
I try to care all the time, and I have great ways now that I like stalk my parents without them knowing it. And I have people deliver things, I call the police up, I know when they're getting pulled over, I know how long they haven't had their license, and it's, like, I know all this stuff, and I turn them in nicely, but, like, they're not gonna change. And I
Right.
really care, but that's not gonna change either, so, but, how many people in this younger generation just sneak around, and try to be nice?
I think it's pretty common in that role of the caregiver.
Get to know their neighbors. So
Oh,
their neighbors can help you.
Neighbors
teach
are
them.
30 miles away.
Yeah, their healthcare providers, that's another one too, like, hey, you can't tell me
Oh, yeah, we
anything, but-
deliver letters and, that doesn't,
That's a whole nother support group we need to start.
Yeah, when she said, are you over 10, I'm like, try 20.
And how to get your parent not to go for rides or go places
Oh,
with
at
their
3 in the
friends.
morning.
Their
3 in
friends
the
who
morning,
are
you
not
end up in a
capable of
ditch.
driving any better than they are.
Well, and I had my mother who would go to Fred Meyer, and then she would accept a ride home from anybody. But they seemed really nice.
Well, it was like, why don't I drive you and
Yes,
Frankie?
yes.
Because I don't think, it's like having a teenager with a,
No, it's worse.
with an
I got
irresponsible
you.
friend.
I have a couple of questions here that are related to caring for kids, caring for children. And the one is the senior center, this area senior centers are wonderful resources for older populations and caregivers. Is there something similar for caregivers with children under 18? My first thought is schools. I mean, that's where the kids are. And so if there's a way to connect with other people around, your child's teacher and other people around your children there. Idaho Parents Unlimited is the, parent resource center for the state. So there's not local versions of it around the state, but they are kind of a hub and spoke organization in that they're connected with parents around the state that can help other parents with caregiving strategies, with resource information, with a listening ear, or support. And IPOL is run by parents of kids with disabilities. So and their number is 208-342-5884. And their director is Angela Lindig. She has 3 kids with disabilities, all of whom are now grown, but she knows her stuff. And so I would share that as a resource for parents raising children.
The
Now-
Thrive Center at the YMCA is a
Yes,
huge
Yes.
you're right.
resource,
The-
especially especially the South Y at Tomlinson, if you have a child with disabilities, get connected
Exactly
there.
right.
And they offer one-on-one aids for you to be able to work out. They offer amazing parent nights out. I mean, there's kids that have never left their primary adult that, feel safe enough and stable enough, and it's really a great community.
There's a group
Yes.
called
Oh.
Raise to Rare.
Oh yeah,
Within
Raise
this
for Rare.
community.
Raise for Rare is very specific in the extent that your child needs to be diagnosed with they have to be diagnosed with something that they are dying.
Yeah.
But yeah, then they shovel your walks, they provide house cleaning, they provide food care, they provide respites for the parents. It's pretty tricky to fall exactly into that and to have it within a timeline but it's a great resource.
The Idaho Association for the Education of Young
I was
Children.
thinking
Helps with caring for young children and supports the caregivers.
And they are great advocates for child care.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's a huge.
I also think of FY Idaho, who's the old, the Idaho, they have that long acronym that I forgot, the Idaho Federation on Family, yeah, that makes sense. They're FY Idaho now, they're doing a lot of that work as well, particularly around children's mental health type stuff and parent coaching and that. Also too, the National Alliance on Mental Illness they're always kind of standing up those kind of support groups too around children's issues. There's, again, caring's very fragmented, right? There's all the little pieces and parts that we try to kind of bring together at the Alliance.
St. Luke's is having some community meetings around like teenage mental illness and different things like that. They've been doing a great job in Valley County with that, but that's another resource if you're looking at more like middle school or high school mental illness issues.
I think one of the things we've learned through COVID is kind of a lot of services and supports have kind of bubbled up that we were unaware of, or they've developed when they weren't there because of the needs of families during COVID. So, but you can come, even if it's not a caregiver over the age of 18, you can call the family caregiver navigator.
We won't hang up on you.
And have someone to talk to about exactly these issues, because we do know about resources for kids. So, I would encourage you to just call or have a caregiver in your life call, and they don't have to have a care plan, they can just have somebody to talk to.
Yeah, definitely. And I've got a couple more things here, quick ones. I would like to mention this presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the IWCF website, so that's on there. How to support services work in rural communities. Man, we could talk for another hour about that. Rural communities do a really nice job a lot of the time at meeting the needs of their small communities sometimes. I think about examples like, we kind of realized a while back we'd never gotten a call from Idaho City. I'm kind of thinking one day, because in Child Protection I used to be out there all the time in Idaho City. Well, it's because Idaho City in that area, they're doing a really nice job of just kind of taking care of each other. And so like, for example, like if somebody needs propane, well, the sheriff's office will drive some propane out there. They're gonna do things through the schools, so we don't always hear about that stuff. But just recently we had a woman out of Chalice that came to us and was trying to kind of find services, and she'd gotten all these great connections from one of the AAA's, the Area Agencies on Aging. But she's like, I want to do all this stuff, but I don't know how to get on the internet. But it's all there. So I called the library down the street, and the library's like, oh yeah, we can help her get on the, because I didn't know what else to do. It's like, yeah, we can help her get on the internet, send her down, she's right down the street. But also too, we have this kind of helping program within the library, and we have these things right here in our city. And so we think sometimes in rural communities are these little pockets of things that we don't always hear about. We actually have a person on our team right now that is really working to compile those rural resources, because we keep hearing these little stories of like this, it was called Chalice Buddies, and so Chalice Buddies, they'll just call and check in on you, know? But they're not advertising their services, and the sheriff's deputy in Idaho City, he's not putting a flyer up saying, hey, I've got propane for you. It's just like, see, you need villainy, you need this, we're gonna take it over there, firewood, just kind of thinking about that kind of stuff. So I think rural communities are doing that work of trying to really support each other, but it's weighing on everybody.
And often non-traditional.
Yeah, non-traditional stuff,
So
yeah.
it's through the churches, through civic groups,
Libraries are
schools,
huge.
libraries.
Yeah.
Those are the connections in rural communities. Are you from Valley County?
Valley and Ada.
Yeah.
Split my time.
Definitely. So, and this one, yeah, we do this all the time. I care for a family member who lives in Oregon and I live in Idaho. Would our program be a good resource? Yeah, give us a call. We get those calls actually all the time. Like, so my sister's in Nebraska taking care of my mom and she's going to rip her hair out. What can I do? And so we will at least just do that initial searching and say, oh yeah, this is what's happening for caregivers in Nebraska. We'll try to make that phone call, whatever's going on. Oregon has a really nice setup. They actually have state-funded caregiver services. So I mean, you're welcome to call us. We can connect you, or just Google Oregon caregiver, and it's the state of Oregon's got their whole thing right there on how to connect to them. So every state has some version of caregiver services. It just looks very different state to state, depending on funding and I'm sure other factors that I'm not aware of. Anything else we missed on these questions, or?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All of you.
Thank you. Please help yourself to resources over here.